Victoria was born in a small, forgotten village far from the glimmering city lights. From the very beginning, life seemed to challenge her at every corner. Her family was not wealthy. Her father worked long hours on the farm, often coming home with tired hands and a weary smile. Her mother, while loving and devoted, was busy taking care of Victoria's two younger brothers and barely had time to listen to Victoria's daydreams. Yet, from her earliest memories, Victoria was drawn to beauty and art. She would spend hours making dresses for her dolls out of old clothes and scraps of fabric her mother discarded. She would set up little fashion shows in their cramped living room, imagining an audience applauding her with admiration. When she looked into the cracked mirror, she didn't see a poor, skinny girl with tangled hair. She imagined she was a princess or a star on a dazzling stage. School was not much easier for Victoria. Her classmates poked fun at her tattered shoes and hammer-down dresses. They called her ragdoll and sometimes left her out of games or groups. Victoria felt the sting of loneliness, but she learned to hide her pain behind a gentle smile. Deep down, she held tightly to her dreams. Every evening, as she lay in bed staring at the faded stars painted on her ceiling, she whispered her hopes to the darkness, promising herself she would one day show everyone just how bright she could shine. One winter evening, after a particularly difficult day at school, Victoria sat by the frosted window, quietly sketching a fancy dress in her old notebook. Her mother noticed her and sat down beside her. For the first time in days, her mother took Victoria's hand and listened as she shyly explained her dream of becoming a model and designer. Her mother's eyes welled up with tears, not of sadness, but of pride. With a gentle voice, her mother told her, "Dreams are like seeds in your heart. If you take care of them, even in the hardest soil, they will grow." That night, for the first time in a long while, Victoria went to sleep feeling hopeful. She clung to that feeling as tightly as she could, knowing that her journey was just beginning. The following weeks brought new determination for Victoria. Every day before dawn, she would rise quietly from her bed, careful not to wake her brothers. She tiptoed into the small kitchen, where her mother was already starting the fire for breakfast, and practiced walking with balance and poise, pretending the faded linoleum was a catwalk in Paris. She'd balance books on her head, imitating the grace she'd seen in the old-fashioned magazines that her mother borrowed from the town library. School still had its challenges. The bullies remained relentless. They mocked her dreams whenever she spoke about them, their words like icy winds against her spirit. But something had changed inside of Victoria. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, comforting her during the hardest moments. Dreams are seeds. They need care. One afternoon, as Victoria was walking home from school, she noticed a poster taped to the window of the tiny bakery on the corner. It was for a local talent show, Show Your Star. Seeking boys and girls to participate, singers, dancers, even aspiring models. Victoria's heart thumped with both fear and excitement. Perhaps, she thought, this could be her chance, her first real stage. At home, she nervously showed the poster to her mother. To her surprise, her mother's eyes sparkled. "You should try," she encouraged. "I'll help you get ready." The next week was a blur of anticipation. After her chores and schoolwork, Victoria worked with her mother to sew a simple but elegant dress from leftover fabric, using lace from an old curtain for accents. They rehearsed for hours, with her mother teaching her how to walk tall, how to smile naturally, how to turn and pose. The night of the talent show arrived, and Victoria's whole family squeezed into the crowded community hall, beaming with pride. Her hands trembled as she climbed the stage, but when she saw her mother smiling in the crowd, she took a deep breath and began her walk. The stage lights felt warm and bright, a taste of a dream she'd carried for so long. She didn't win the competition, but she won the applause of the audience and the respect of her classmates, who saw a side of Victoria they'd never expected. Something small but powerful had begun to shift. Victoria wasn't just the quiet girl in old clothes, she was now the girl who had dared to shine. That night, as she laid her simple dress across her chair, Victoria felt a flame of hope burning stronger than ever. She knew her road would not be easy, but her seeds of hope had begun to sprout. After the talent show, Victoria found herself walking through the village with her head held a little higher. The kids at school, who used to tease her, now looked at her with a new kind of respect. Even the teachers began to notice her unique sense of style, quietly commenting on the creativity she brought to her outfits and her drawings. However, Victoria's dreams began to stretch beyond the fields and quiet lanes of her little village. She started borrowing every fashion magazine and book she could find from the library, obsessively studying the models and designers featured in their glossy pages. The stories of perseverance and transformation inspired her, fueling her desire to break free from the limits of her surroundings. But opportunity was hard to find. Victoria's family had little money, and the nearest city, with its potential modeling agencies and fashion schools, was hours away. Whenever Victoria brought up the idea of traveling there, her father would sigh and her mother would frown with worry. "We don't have the means, sweetheart," her mother said gently. "But keep learning. Hard work can open doors you never even knew existed." One day, a visitor arrived at Victoria's school. Miss Thompson, an elegant woman dressed in professional attire, came to speak about a scholarship program for gifted students. When Victoria listened to Miss Thompson talk about the city and all the possibilities it held, her heart raced with excitement. After the presentation, Victoria found the courage to approach Miss Thompson and showed her some of her sketchbooks. The woman was genuinely impressed. "You have talent and passion," she said. "Apply for the scholarship, and whatever happens, promise me you'll keep believing in yourself." That night, Victoria stayed up late, working on her application. She included sketches, a heartfelt essay about her dreams, and pictures from the village talent show. The entire family gathered around as she sealed the envelope, all of them hoping for the best. Weeks passed. Victoria's hopes rose and fell each day as she waited for a response. Finally, a thin letter arrived bearing the city school's emblem. With trembling hands, Victoria opened it, and read words that would change her life forever. She had been accepted. For the first time, Victoria saw a path stretching beyond her village, lined with opportunities she had only dared to imagine. With a mixture of fear and excitement, she began preparing for her biggest journey yet. The train ride from the village to the city was both exhilarating and terrifying for Victoria. She had never traveled so far from home. The landscape shifted quickly. Rolling hills and green fields gave way to apartment blocks, billboards, honking cars, and the distant silhouette of skyscrapers. Her mother sat quietly beside her, clutching her hand. Both were trying to hide their nervousness for the other's sake. Arriving at the city's great railway station, Victoria felt as if she had stepped onto another planet. Crowds pushed past each other, bright lights flashed everywhere, and the noise was a constant rushing wave. The unfamiliar smells, perfume, traffic, roasted chestnuts, imprinted themselves in her mind forever. Victoria's small suitcase felt heavier with every step, but excitement pulled her along. Her new school was a place she had only seen in dreams. Rows of tall windows, studios full of paintings and runways, teachers bustling between lessons. Victoria's dorm room was shared with two girls from other parts of the country. Each had their own ambitions and stories. Their accents and mannerisms made Victoria feel shy and out of place. At night, she missed the familiar sounds of her brothers and the kitchen fire crackling. The first weeks were difficult. Most students seemed older, richer, and more confident than Victoria. They wore expensive clothes, carried the latest handbags and phones, and spoke about their summer holidays in exotic places. Victoria, in her worn but carefully mended coat, grew quiet and observed. In group projects, she worried her accent would show she was just a village girl. When some of the others sneered at her simple outfits, it brought back all the old fears. Determined not to be left behind, Victoria threw herself into every assignment. She drew without rest, spent hours practicing her walk and posture in the large studio mirrors, and volunteered for every fashion show, no matter how small the role. She listened to every teacher's advice, studied her classmates' work, and watched hours of fashion documentaries late into the night. On the weekends, when her mother visited with homemade treats, they would take cheap bus rides through the city. They gazed into the windows of designer boutiques and famous department stores. Victoria dreamed aloud, describing how the city's energy made her hungry to work harder. "It's beautiful but so hard, Mama," she admitted one evening, as they walked under the glittering lights of a grand boulevard. Her mother squeezed her hand. Anything worth having is hard work, KZM. You're meant for this. Months passed. Victoria began to make friends. Mila, a sculptor's daughter from the coast who helped Victoria with her presentations, and Selin, a quiet girl who longed to design costumes for the theatre. With their support, Victoria's confidence grew. She learned not only about fashion and design but about herself, her resilience, her creativity, her kindness. She saw her background as a source of inspiration, not shame. One day, the school announced its annual fashion show, an event attended by scouts from real agencies. Every student was to submit a design and walk the runway. The competition was fierce, nerves ran high, and Victoria felt the ghosts of old fears whispering to her. Could she compete? Would anyone see her talent beyond her humble origins? Victoria spent nights drawing and sewing in the quiet dormitory. She used leftover fabric from the costume room, beading she scavenged from old projects, and lace that reminded her of home. Her dress was bold yet elegant, its colors inspired by wildflowers on the hills near her village. The night before the show, she wrote a letter to her family, promising to do her best and remembering her mother's words, "Dreams are seeds." The night of the show, under the glaring stage lights and before a sea of strangers, Victoria stepped onto the runway in her creation. Her heart thundered, but she walked with pride, each step an echo of every hardship, every hope, every promise she'd ever made to herself. As she reached the end of the runway, she caught a glimpse of a scout in the front row, watching her intently. In that moment, Victoria realized she was no longer just the girl from the village. She was a young woman with the courage to grow and the will to shine. When the applause faded after the school's annual fashion show, Victoria felt a storm of emotions. She had done it, walked the runway in her own creation, beneath dazzling lights, in front of an audience filled not just with teachers and peers, but with people from the larger world, influencers, photographers, and, more importantly, real fashion scouts. That night, as she lay in her small dorm bed staring at the ceiling, she wondered what it all meant. If she could shine here, maybe she could shine anywhere. The next morning, a letter waited for her at the reception desk. It was a formal invitation to a casting for a well-known modeling agency, one that had launched several famous careers. Victoria's hands trembled while reading it. It felt surreal. She remembered sewing the hem of her first show dress with trembling hands back in her village. Now, the city's doors were opening, if only a crack. But new opportunities brought new pressures. The agency's requirements were strict: balance schoolwork with castings and rehearsals, maintain high grades, attend workshops. Her teachers warned that the industry was competitive and sometimes cruel, and her friends cautioned her, "Don't lose yourself. Stay true to who you are, Victoria." Juggling classes, design projects, and modeling auditions wore her down. For every yes Victoria received, a string of no's followed. One scout thought she wasn't tall enough. Another found her look too unusual. There were moments backstage, waiting in line with dozens of other hopeful faces, when the self-doubt from her past threatened to return. But she remembered her mother's gentle encouragement, and her own promise never to give up. Her family, always her strongest support, made sacrifices to help. Sometimes her father sent small amounts of money, even though she knew the farm was struggling. Her mother visited whenever she could, cooking for Victoria and her roommates, listening to her hardships, never letting her forget where she came from. Victoria wrote home every week, describing the city's dazzling highs and heartbreaking lows. During the year, Victoria's dedication was noticed by Ms. Thompson, the scholarship coordinator. Ms. Thompson arranged for Victoria to work backstage at real-world shows and photo shoots. It was hard labor, lugging clothes, adjusting outfits under pressure, learning the business from the ground up. Through these experiences, Victoria learned how much effort, teamwork, and sacrifice was required behind each moment of glamour. She developed respect for everyone struggling for their dreams: other models, designers, makeup artists, even the dressers who made each show flow seamlessly. But not everyone at the agency was kind. Some other young models excluded her for her simple background and accent. There were times Victoria cried in secret, missing the comfort of her brother's laughter and the peacefulness of her village. But she poured her pain into her sketches and her walks. Worst days fueled her best work. Then, Late one evening, the agency called. A famous international designer, Madame Blanche, had seen Victoria's work at a casting and wanted her for an exclusive show. Victoria almost didn't believe it was real until she saw the contract. She called her family, tears streaming down her face, breathless with excitement. "Mama, they want me, me." Her mother's answer carried love and warning all at once. "Always walk with your head held high, KZM. Never forget who you are, and let your kindness be your guide." Victoria promised. She knew the next chapter would demand even more from her, but her heart was firm. To reach for her dream, she was willing to work harder than ever, to give up comfort, to learn, to persevere, and always remember the village girl who first imagined the stars. That night, Victoria stood by her dormitory window, the city lights shimmering before her, and whispered to herself, "I am ready." The weeks leading to Madame Blanche's exclusive show were a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Madame Blanche was legendary, a designer whose name appeared in fashion history books, known for discovering unique faces who went on to conquer the world's runways. Victoria could barely believe her fortune. Even as she hurried from school to fittings, from castings to the agency, she moved through her days as if walking in a dream. But the dream was not without its shadows. Rehearsals were grueling. Madame Blanche was kind but demanding, perfection in every movement, every line of a dress, every angle of a turn. Victoria and the other models spent hours repeating walks up and down the runway. The designer would pause them abruptly, making adjustments. "Victoria, chin slightly higher. Shoulders relaxed." Then again, "No, your shoulders are too stiff, darling, let go of your anxiety, become the dress." Victoria swallowed her nervousness and absorbed every word, determined never to waste the opportunity. She slept little, sketching new ideas for her portfolios at night and practicing her stride in the early mornings before the world woke. The pressure was overwhelming at times. Some of the more experienced models whispered about Victoria, doubting she could handle the stage. A few mocked her village accent or the way she still stitched her own clothes in the dressing rooms. But others noticed her determination and offered guidance. An older model, Louisa, shared runway tips: "Always look past the lights. Own the space, no matter how scared you are." A makeup artist showed Victoria how to care for her skin, gently explaining tricks to soothe nerves before going on stage. Through it all, Victoria's family became her anchor. Her mother and father wrote daily, though funds were tight for stamps and phone calls. With every "We are proud of you, KZM," she felt braver. Her roommates cheered her on, even helping with last-minute fittings and giving hugs when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. The day of the show arrived, a day Victoria would remember all her life. The backstage area was a blur of urgent voices, last-minute fixes, the smell of hairspray and excitement. Designers and assistants darted back and forth, dressing models with practiced speed. Victoria's heart thudded with adrenaline beneath her gown, a gown that seemed made of clouds and starlight, so different from the simple dresses of her childhood. As the audience began to fill, the front rows with magazine editors, celebrities, critics, and the imposing figure of Madame Blanche, Victoria felt lightheaded. She closed her eyes, recalled her mother's advice, let the noise drift away, and anchored herself in memory, helping her mother sew curtains, walking barefoot in the fields, the laughter of her brothers by the fire. That courage, born from struggle and love, steadied her. Her name was called. Victoria stepped onto the runway for her debut. For a brief instant, the audience, cameras, and bright lights faded away. She was alone with her dream, crossing from her old life into something new. She walked with strength and grace, her eyes calm, her posture elegant. The dress flowed around her, and every step spoke of the journey that brought her here. The applause was thunderous. After the show, backstage teemed with celebration. Photographers asked for her name. A magazine writer wanted an interview. Madame Blanche herself hugged Victoria and whispered, "You are a star." Scouts from international agencies slipped business cards into the pocket of her bag. Louisa winked. "See? You owned the space, just like I said." As Victoria changed into her street clothes, she found a quiet moment by a window overlooking the city. Tears slipped down her cheeks, tears not of sadness but of gratitude and release. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of loneliness and hope had led here. Later, Victoria called her family. She struggled to find the right words, but her brother's shouts of joy and her mother's proud silence on the phone said enough. "We all watched you. You shone so brightly," her father managed at last. That night, curled beneath the covers in the tiny room that still smelled faintly of fabric and hairspray, Victoria allowed herself to dream bigger than ever before. Tomorrow, the journey would continue. But tonight, she was a star, her own star, made by her own light. Victoria's walk on Madame Blanche's runway became the talk of the fashion world overnight. Photos of her poised in that celestial gown were splashed across social media, gracing the covers of influential magazines and featured in online articles. Journalists marveled at her fresh, authentic beauty and her air of quiet confidence. For Victoria, this new attention was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Soon, invitations from other designers and agencies poured in. She was quickly swept into a new life, a jet-setting schedule that took her from city to city, show to show. Milan, Paris, London, Istanbul. Each week she found herself in an unfamiliar place, a whirlwind of cameras, makeup chairs, hurried meals in backstage kitchens, and hurried flights at dawn. Crowds cheered her name, photographers called for her attention, and designers praised her creative spirit. It was everything she had imagined back in her tiny village room. But with her ascent came new challenges. Victoria felt the pressure to always look perfect. She started to notice the subtle, sometimes harsh comments about her appearance, her accent, even her eating habits. Some agents encouraged unhealthy diets. She saw fellow models fall under the weight of perfection, some collapsing backstage or withdrawing from exhaustion. She missed her family deeply. Phone calls became short and rare, handwritten letters almost impossible as her days blurred together. She faced loneliness in hotel rooms high above dazzling cities. Many nights, Victoria would sit by herself, wondering if this was truly the life she had wanted. She craved privacy and a moment of stillness, a walk among the wildflowers, a simple meal shared with her mother, laughter echoing from the fields. The industry was competitive. Trusted friends were few. She learned to be cautious whom she trusted, to protect her heart and her reputation. There were rumors, jealousy from other models, and critical articles. Is Victoria too inexperienced for the big leagues? Floated online. Each word stung, but Victoria remembered her mother's warning. Let your kindness be your guide. Despite it all, Victoria worked harder than ever. She turned to sketching as a sanctuary, filling notebooks with designs inspired by homesickness and hope. She found her own voice, refusing to conform to unhealthy standards. Gradually, she became an advocate for kindness and authenticity in the fashion world, sharing her true story in interviews and uplifting others, especially newcomers from humble backgrounds. Her family remained her foundation. Whenever possible, Victoria returned home to her village. She would walk the familiar fields and visit her old school, speaking to younger students about believing in their dreams. With the money she earned, she helped her parents on the farm and supported her brother's education, using her spotlight to improve the life she left behind. Still, the battle inside Victoria never fully faded. She fought insecurities, doubts, and the relentless demands of fame. But with each struggle, she grew stronger and wiser. One night, after a prestigious award ceremony in Paris, Victoria stood before a glittering crowd and delivered a speech that moved everyone to silence. "I may come from a small village," she began, "but dreams are bigger than any one place. If you have the courage to keep going, to be kind, and to lift others up, you'll find your own light." As she stepped down from the stage, applause roaring behind her, Victoria realized that her true strength wasn't just her beauty or success, it was her resilience, her empathy, and the courage to stay true to herself. The years after her meteoric rise on the international runways were transformative for Victoria. Her name became synonymous with not only beauty and talent but also with kindness and perseverance. She was in demand in every major fashion capital, her face gracing magazine covers, her story inspiring countless young girls from small towns and sprawling cities alike. Yet with every accolade, Victoria never lost sight of her beginnings. As her fame grew, so did her sense of responsibility. Victoria began using her visibility for good causes, campaigns supporting access to education for rural girls, organizations fighting against unrealistic body standards, and charities providing scholarships for aspiring artists and designers from underprivileged backgrounds. She often spoke about her own journey, encouraging young people to find strength not from where they came from, but from the dreams that guided them. But even in the glow of the limelight, Victoria remained profoundly human. The challenges never fully disappeared. The industry could still be harsh, the media still relentless, and loneliness still crept in between the bright flashes of cameras. At times she struggled with exhaustion, the pressure to remain perfect, and the responsibility of being a role model. Yet every time she faltered, she thought of home, her family's steadfast support, the wildflowers on the hills, the lessons of her mother's gentle hands and her father's quiet courage. It was during a trip home after a major European fashion tour that Victoria felt the full circle of her journey. She returned to her village not as a distant celebrity, but as a beloved daughter and sister. The villagers gathered to welcome her, some shy, some in awe, but all proud to see one of their own achieve so much. She visited her old school, the library where she first pored over worn fashion magazines, and the bakery that had once displayed the talent show poster which changed her life. Moved by the joy and hope she saw in the eyes of the village children, Victoria founded a small community center. There, she taught workshops on confidence, self-expression, and design. She listened to dreams that echoed her own childhood wishes, encouraging the next generation to believe in themselves. Many times, she repeated her mother's words, "Dreams are seeds. In any soil, if you care for them, they can grow." Victoria's new collection, her own brand, not modeled only by her but designed and curated, debuted on the world stage in Paris. The runway sparkled, not just with sequins and bold colors inspired by her village's wildflowers, but with models of all backgrounds and stories, each one chosen not for perfection, but for passion and authenticity. Critics called the show revolutionary, a return to truth and feeling. In the front row, her family watched with misty eyes as Victoria closed the show. As she walked down the runway, proud, graceful, the embodiment of her own dreams, she felt as if every trial, every night spent sketching by candlelight, every lonely city, every tear, and every spark of hope had led to this single moment. After the final bow and the show's thunderous applause, Victoria stood under the bright Parisian night sky, remembering the faded stars she once gazed at from her small bedroom ceiling. She realized she no longer reached for those distant lights, she carried her own within her. For every child who dreamed, for every person who struggled, for every seed of hope planted in unlikely soil, Victoria became proof that with courage, kindness, and faith in oneself, anyone could rise and shine. And so, Victoria was not just a star on the runways. She was a light for others, ever glowing, ever growing, forever a model, in every sense of the word.